Hi, I'm Sarah Beth Goer.
And I'm Jennifer Jill Araya.
Welcome to the Crafting Audiobooks podcast, where we discuss the art and craft of audiobooks, and we aim to go deep quick.
Hello, Crafting Audiobook listeners. We are so excited to have with us today our guest, producer, director, podcast host, and audiobook narrator. She does all of those things, Emily Pike Stewart. Emily,
and
welcome.
I drive a van, too.
Yes. And you drive a very cool, very colorful, delightful van. I love it. Welcome, Emily.
Thank you so much. I was so excited when you reached out to me to be on this. I love talking to you all.
Yeah, likewise. Well, because we are a podcast that likes to go deep quick, let's get right to our first question, which, Emily, I would love if you could share with us one book that you think is an example of you at your very best as an audiobook artist. Now, that could be a book you produced or directed or narrated or whatever, however you worked on it. And then also, with that one book, if you could share what your biggest creative challenge was within that project.
Yes. So I had to think about this question for a while because I've done so many different things in the audiobook realm. You know, I actually started out as an editor for many years. And then I moved into, I started out as a narrator, but that it was very sporadic and sort of mostly for Learning Ally and the NLS and that kind of thing. And then professionally edited for many years and worked on some really amazing titles doing that, and then narrated more, and then got into directing, and now I'm a producer as well. So there were just, when you said audiobook artist, I'm like, oh God, what does that even mean? So I had to think back on all of the different things that I've done and ask kind of what is one of the titles that I really feel like I put most of my heart into and that had kind of, I think, maybe the biggest impact going out into the world. And when I thought about it in those terms, one that came back top of list was reading Lolita in Tehran. I edited the second recording, I believe, of this book. So it had already come out maybe like 10 years prior, but they re-recorded it with the author. And so when I edited this book, first of all, it was extremely long. I think it ended up being like 17 hours or something, very long book. So it was a lot of work. But she has a very beautiful, lilting Farsi accent to her English. And it made it a really difficult edit because there are a lot of places where her breath was so important, or kind of the way that certain vowel sounds, sort of like the zh and the f and the z, the way that those would end. You got to be careful not to cut those things off, but then also not to have extraneous sounds at the end of them. And her language flowed like music, and it really had to be put together in a very particular way, not to lose any of that. And as I was listening to this book, I just felt like the way that she told stories, in addition to the stories she was telling, I mean, about brutal things that were happening in her homeland, and then coming together with these women to explore these literary themes in the midst of this political violence. And it was an incredibly moving project to work on. And I just really felt like it had to be perfect. Like it really needed to be everything that it could be because it was so important. And so I edited the whole thing, and I went back again and listened through the entire thing again, which is not normally, I think we all know that's not normally how someone edits, but I just had to get these pauses and these sounds and the musicality and just go back and listen to it again for the flow of it. And so I think that, when we take care of something, it often feels extra special to us. And so even though there are projects that I've worked on that I feel like, oh, maybe I, did a really great job with that, it's different than truly taking care of a story. And I think that is what my relationship with this book was. I felt like this author, this woman, was sitting, like listening to this book and being in this experience of editing it, felt like we were sitting in her living room, or she was sitting in my living room. And I just got to come, like every day when I came to work on this book for the few weeks that I was with it, it felt like we were sitting down to have tea together. And she was telling me these stories and I was spending this time with her. I felt like we were friends by the end of this book, even though we've never met and I've never sent her a note or anything. I felt very tied to and connected to what she did, and really felt like I had a responsibility to take care of her work and to make it the best that I could. And it's also one of the only books, I will say, I think that actually ended up being, maybe sometimes when we put that energy into something, it comes out on the other side, because it's actually one of the only books that I ever worked on as an editor that I got specific feedback. This was really beautifully done.
Oh.
Normally it would just be you continue to get hired if you do a good job, right? But you don't get a lot of feedback as an editor. It's really only if there are problems that someone says something to you. And so that was one of the only books that I got feedback that specifically was, this was really, really well edited and a really nice job. So I think that it also came through that care was taken.
Wow. It feels like this particular project meant so much to you that it kind of lit up that artistic self, your deepest, most creative essence, and allowed you a medium to let that come through. It's beautiful.
Yeah. And I wonder sometimes too, like, when you say the artistic essence, actually, now that I'm thinking about it in terms of that taking care of it, it's almost like there are two different ways that sometimes I think I artistically, and I'm wondering even if I should categorize that as artistic. I feel like yes, but I'm also sensing kind of two different ways that this could go now, because sometimes when I am artistically involved in something, I do have this sort of, it's almost like a maternal sense of this thing that I'm taking care of and that I'm ushering through, and that um, I'm not necessarily creating it, but I am responsible for its well-being. And then there's the other side where I am creating something. And I think narration, is a little bit more in that regard. And sometimes directing. I think directing might be a little bit more in the caretaking side of it. But yeah, when I think about actually creating something and being lit up in that creative way, it's something slightly different. This was caretaking. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does.
Yeah, I'm hearing almost the difference between birthing something and being its auntie or nanny or
Yeah, like the birthing versus the nurturing. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I hear that difference, and I also would argue, or at least state for me, that they are both creative acts. They are both acts that require artistry and attention and care that to me is very creative. So
yeah. And I do think that editing is one of the I think and maybe it's because I was in that role for so long and I saw how much I have always felt since those years that editors are the one link in the production chain that gets almost no credit, and yet they fix everyone else's mistakes. If there's something going on with the producer, maybe they didn't have the timeline quite right, the editor is usually the one that's making up the difference there. If the narrator is maybe not doing the greatest job, like say it's a newer narrator or someone that is an author or someone who doesn't have a lot of expertise with that, the editor is often the one that is able to take all the things that they've been given and kind of piece it together into something that makes them sound really good. If there's an issue with, pretty much anywhere along the production chain, if there's an issue with one of the other rules, the editor is somehow making up the difference. And yet they often don't get credited for anything. People don't understand the work that they've done. And I do think it can be a very artistic role to take all of the different takes and the information from a director sometimes, or making directorial choices yourself as the editor if there was no director, and putting that all together into the best finished product, adjusting pauses, adjusting different things for effect to help out the narrator's performance. I think it can be a very artistic position, and we often don't even think of it that way. So,
yeah, for sure.
I love this. We have a question that we ask editors, which is editing and art a science or both. And we weren't expecting to have this beautiful, deep exploration about the art of editing with you today. But what a special facet of the craft to highlight.
I would say art and science both for sure. And I think I feel that way about almost everything, because I actually taught a directing class last year that I believe I had titled The Art and Science of Audiobook Directing.
Oh, love it.
So I feel like there's always like a logistical side of things that you can break down, and that's sort of the science of it. You can give yourself formulas to follow and plans and maps and that kind of thing. And then there's the artistic side where you bring your own creative essence to it, your own experiences of life, your own humanity, and it helps you inform whatever those formulas are. It's like plugging in the variables.
Yeah.
I love your brain, Emily. I'm just having a moment where I'm like, I can't believe we get to have these conversations and share them with the community. This is so cool. Emily, what is one element of the craft of audiobook narration that you're really working on deeply right now?
So one thing that I have been over the last, I'd say it started about 6 months ago. And recently, like within the last couple of weeks, I've really dived deep into it even more, is getting back into my entire body as a performer. 2 weekends ago, Andy Paris, who I'm not exactly sure who he is with right now. I think he might do casting for PRH, but he and a business partner just opened a new voiceover studio in Manhattan. And he has, I think, kind of his own production arm of things. So I know he's doing that. But he originally, when I met him, was producing for Recorded Books and cast me on my first sort of industry professional audiobook narration title. So that's how I met him a long time ago. And then he kind of left New York and left not audiobooks entirely, but more of that side of performance and went more back into theater because he was teaching at, I think, a school in North Carolina for a while. Anyway, he recently moved back to the city, opened this studio, and I was looking at his LinkedIn, or rather he has posts that come up on my feed. And one of the things that came up was that he and a group of other teachers were hosting a Grotowski-based training workshop in New York, in Brooklyn. And for those who are not familiar with some of the theater methodologies, Grotowski is a very physically based way of approaching theater. You do a lot of different exercises to sort of get yourself out of any mental associations with things and just allow your body to respond to the environment and to the people and things around you. And it's a really incredibly fascinating way of beginning to understand that your body has an entire language and set of experiences and knowledge and wisdom and history all its own that we don't even have access to mentally. And if you can sort of step back from controlling your body with your mind, it has its own whole life that it is ready to live, and that it is informed by all of the things that have informed your personality or your worldview mentally and emotionally that you can be conscious about. But your body has its own whole set of ways of responding to those things that you don't even know because we're constantly, it's kind of, life is a little bit of a tyranny of the mind, right? Like we're kind of always using our mind to control where our life is headed and what we're doing and what our body is doing. And the body doesn't really get a say in a lot of stuff a lot of the time. So I did this workshop a couple weekends ago, and now I'm actually going to Poland to visit the Grotowski Institute at the last minute. I was already going to be in London for a podcast thing and decided to hop over to Poland for a week after that. So I am deeply diving back into this world of what is it that our bodies bring to the work? Mm-hmm. Not just our emotions, not just our minds, but like truly the subconscious language of our bodies. Because our bodies are our instrument. Our voice is not just our vocal cords. It's not just the face mask. It's not just the lungs and the diaphragm. It's literally all the way down to the pinky toes. We have 206 bones in the body. Every single one of them is a resonator. And the way that the muscles react and respond and are engaging around those bones affects how those resonators function. And our emotions are what are affecting the way that those muscles are and how the rest of our tissues are functioning. Like every single cell in our body is part of our voice. And so I really believe that if I'm cut off from my body, or I'm not paying attention to what my body is doing. And now I have a very new lens of looking at what my body is doing because I understand more about my brain and my nervous system than I did a couple years ago. So there's just all of these new ways that I'm kind of re-exploring how my body comes into my work as a storyteller, and in particular as a narrator.
I would love to hear a little bit more about how you're applying this specifically to narration work, because we have talked before on the podcast in various interviews that, even though we are still, as we're narrating, our whole body is involved. But I don't know that I ever have thought about allowing my brain to take the back seat and allow my body to lead that acting in my narration work, because we are so stationary. I mean, if we move too far, we're going to get out of the sweet spot of the mic. Like, being somewhat still is important. So how are you using this in your narration? Do tell. I want to hear more about this.
So the first answer is I'm still figuring that out myself.
Sure.
But the second one is, when you're a meditator, you might spend 20 minutes on the mat each day meditating. And in that 20 minutes, you are doing something very specific. You are just meditating. But the goal is not that you meditate for 20 minutes every day. The goal is that when you're out in life and in the real world and things come at you, you maybe find a 2-second pause that helps you make different decisions than you would have before. And that's what that 20 minutes is for every day. So I think it's kind of the same thing about working with our bodies. We don't work with our bodies while we're narrating, because that, like you said, we have specific logistical things that we need our minds for to be able to, even just to read and to use the words on the page, we need our minds for that. We need to be engaged fully with all of that. But what I'm doing is some work outside of the booth. So trying to do some more of these particularly Grotowski-based exercises. There are some different things that I learned there. But also just I've been coming back into paying more attention to what my body wants, like going on long walks and just letting myself do that without, my mind being like, we got to get back. We got these things to do. We need to do this. You know what? We only live one life and I want to go on a walk, and I need to do that sometimes, like we've got to let our bodies have what they want sometimes. And I think for most of my life, I've just realized that I've been controlling my body into doing the things I feel like I should be doing and not really giving it its own voice. And if I'm not sticking up for it, then I'm not doing my job as a whole person. So I need to start listening to it more. And maybe that means saying no to other things. So that's part of the practice as well. I think when we revolutionize the way that we're functioning with one part of things, it's always going to have far-reaching effects into other areas of our life. So even just getting back into my body and understanding it better and listening to it more for this work, it's having far-reaching effects on relationships and things that I agree to do or things that I don't agree to do, or if I decide to go on this trip, or maybe I just need to rest this weekend, or, and so far all of it's been really positive. So I think it's worth doing. But it does call for changes. And I think that's sometimes why we struggle to make those changes in the small ways, because we know that eventually they're going to have farther reaching effects. It's scary to listen to our bodies for the first time, because if we listen and they say something and we say, oh, no, I don't want to do that, then we have to be honest with ourselves that we're denying ourselves something. And that's its own difficult thing, right? So I think that when we're doing this work, it's actually much more outside of the booth and in our lives as humans than it is trying to do any particular thing once we start narrating. It's almost like we do all of this stuff and then that informs what we do while we're narrating.
So I'm a little speechless because of how powerful I'm finding this conversation. But you know me, I'll find words. So I'm struck by the potency of what you're doing, because it's actually counterculture.
It is.
It's a personal revolution, breaking free from what we're taught about how to be, starting with, like, we go to school and we're told, like, sit still, don't fidget, look at the teacher, etc. I'm also very moved because I'm very passionate about somatic release work, which is a broad category, but basically is, working with releasing traumas, challenges through the body therapeutically instead of just talk therapy. And I've found it
Hmm.
to be profound in my life. And I really resonate with what you're saying about, um, like, you've just put it so beautifully. I can't say it better about how profound it can be, and that it can be scary, and it leads us to changes, and those changes are for the better in our lives. I've actually been finding that the more I attune to my body and what my body needs, the more that is how that I am in the booth working from my body more and more. That like my body leads and my brain like follows or supports when it needs to, kind of thing. So even when I'm very still, I can still notice the sensations in my body. I can still come like from my like what is instinct? Instinct is
Yes.
this gut impulse from my body instead of from my head. So I can
Yes.
be sitting still in the booth and still be leading with this body experience
Yes. Yeah.
without moving physically away from the mic. That's what I've been finding.
And it's a circular process too, because we need our imaginations to create these imaginary circumstances for our body to respond to.
Mm,
So we are using our minds in the booth quite a bit, but we also have to step back a little bit to allow our bodies to respond to those imaginary circumstances, and then to be able to notice that and have that continue to develop that imaginary relationship with this story as we're moving through it. So it all works together. It's a very beautiful cycle.
It absolutely is. And I love the thought of allowing care for yourself and attention for your physical self outside of the booth spilling over into and informing the creative process inside the booth. That to me just is a truly exquisite process and delightful and really valuable, I think.
Absolutely. And I want to speak to what Sarah said about it being countercultural and sort of a personal revolution. It's not something I ever started out to do that way, but I think that it's almost impossible to begin to truly move through this work in that way and not come to that same conclusion, and not to realize this is completely different from everything I've ever been taught about how to relate to myself. And then it really starts to ask a lot of questions about how different systems are set up, about how we interact with each other, about how, I mean, it really it changes your paradigm for the way that everything works. And I think that is very much why, it's hard to imagine. Why would anyone want to defund the arts? Why would anyone want to be against the arts? They're fun. They're also a lot more than fun. They're human. And when you start to let people really be human, a lot of these systems that have been set up to keep us in little boxes so that we function a certain way that's deemed the best for everybody. But I think that as we found over time, isn't necessarily the best for everybody. It's really, really threatening to those ways of doing things. And I think individual people have a much easier time when they pay attention to themselves of seeing, oh, it could be better. These things could all be so much better if we were more accepting of different complexities and if we were able to really integrate a lot of variety into the way that things are approached. But systems themselves don't really want to change. And so when we are in tune with our actual selves and our actual needs, we become a threat. And so they don't necessarily it's not about arts being fun and wanting to take that away. There's sort of like a much deeper way of looking at that isn't as apparent on the surface. But once you really start to pay attention to it yourself, you start to get, oh, I think I see why this might not be such a good thing to everybody. And yet you also realize that it's kind of the healing that everyone needs.
You are brilliant and articulate in my judgment, Emily. Very, very well put.
Thank you for sharing that. Emily, I'd love to turn the conversation just a little bit, or maybe not. And I would love for you to speak some to how your directing, and I'm actually going to add this in there, and or your editing experience has influenced your craft work as a narrator, and or vice versa. So if there's anything as a narrator that's changed how you direct or edit, I'd love to know that as well. But I mean, you work in so many different facets of the audiobook industry. I would love to know how those different disciplines have cross-pollinated.
Absolutely. So I love that I came to editing with an actor's perspective. First of all, I was an actor all growing up. I was in my first play when I was 6. I was the rocking horse in the Velveteen Rabbit. Still remember the little song that I sang. Um, and I loved being in drama class. I loved being in plays. When I was 12, I was Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, and that was when I knew that I wanted to be an actor when I grew up. That was when I decided to do that. And so all through high school, I did acting at a after-school conservatory that was really pretty cool. I mean, they were pretty well known nationally. They were the only youth theater to ever do the entire Shakespeare canon. They had a Young American Shakespeare Festival that they did for 30 some odd years, and they went through the whole canon and loved all of that. So I was very well versed in acting and theater history and all of that. I went to NYU for undergrad, got my BFA there. And then after school, as many do, I struggled financially as a young actor. It was not going great. So I ended up my first sort of big girl job that I got. I was nannying and doing, the Starbucks barista thing for a while for health insurance, but I still just was not making ends meet. And I used a credit card for the first time to buy groceries and then had like a nervous breakdown afterwards. Like, I can't do this. So I was like sitting there crying and like praying. So I'm a praying person. And I was like, God, I don't know what to do. Like, please, I need like a real job. And I went on Craigslist and I found like the first thing that I saw was boutique voiceover studio in Manhattan needs a studio manager. And I looked at the things and I was like, I can do this. So I applied, I got the job. And then that's how I ended up getting into editing, was that while I was there, it was the recession. The studio was basically empty. And I was like, give me something to do, teach me. So I learned how to do the editing and all of that. So that's how I ended up getting into all of this other stuff. But I came from this really rich background of acting. So when I got into editing and I started working with all of these narrators that would come into the studio, I felt like I really knew how to speak their language. And I really knew like how the structure of storytelling, all of that needed to be put together. And so it was really cool to come at the editing side of things with this really rich understanding of storytelling and acting. And there was even one narrator, I won't say his name, very golden voice. He was like, I only want you editing my stuff because you always make sure that the pauses that I did get left in, and like you really pay attention to the way that I tell stories. And so I feel like it fed into that as an editor. Then as an editor, because I was working for this studio and because I got in with all of the big publishers sort of right off the bat, right when I, started and got to work with them for 7-8 years while I was an editor, I got to listen to all of the best performances and I got paid to do it. And it was awesome. I got to listen to Katie Kellgren, bless her soul. I got to listen to, just all, Robert Petkoff was there all the time. I edited some of his stuff. I can't even think of names off the top of my head because there's so many of them. Jim Dale. I mean, I got to work on one of Jim Dale's books. It was just amazing. I basically got paid to take masterclass after masterclass of how to be an audiobook narrator. And so when I decided to go into commercial narration, I really felt like I got to kind of hit the ground running, because I had listened to all of these masters across so many different genres and across so many different performance styles. And so I really felt like I knew what to give to a project. And then as a narrator, you get to explore all that stuff all over again in a new way with your own body and your own imagination and your own vocal instrument. Because, there are people that can do like really they can narrate a book and they can sound like they're 15 different people and you really don't even know. It's almost like, I can't do that. That's not how my instrument works. But I also know that I don't need to worry about that because some of my favorite narrators are the people that you can tell who the different characters are because of the nuances in the way that their voices are delivered. It's not changing pitch and changing tone so much as it is changing. You can feel the person shift behind each. And that's more my style of narration. So there were also a lot of things I think like that when I came into narration, I wasn't as worried about. I see so many narrators getting so concerned about a lot of things that having that whole breadth of listening to all of these different performances, I'm like, you're okay. This is okay. You don't need to worry about that, right? Like, you got this. There are plenty of narrators that do it your way, and you don't need to be everything to everyone. Did that answer that question enough? Would you like any more?
No, that absolutely did. And I love the understanding of the breadth of different styles and techniques and elements of characterization that you brought to narration from the editing work. It, again, just allowed you to say that whatever I choose, all of these things have spectrums. And it doesn't matter necessarily where on that spectrum I land, because really good narration can be anywhere all along that. And also different books require different elements of that. I mean, there are some books that need those super extreme characterizations, whereas others, if you did those drastically different character voices, it actually wouldn't serve the story as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like we could talk for at least 3 more hours, but we have reached our minimum, yes. But we have reached our last question, and this is the question that we are all going to answer. The question is, what is exciting you about the craft right now, today? Jennifer, would you like to kick us off?
Sure. So I had made a couple notes about what I was excited about ahead of time, as I usually do. And it actually blends perfectly with what Emily was just talking about, with the many different styles and takes and elements that make up this thing that we call the audiobook industry. Right now, I'm in the process of working with the faculty members for the Thriving Narrators Retreat, of which Emily is one, to figure out our programming for the 2025 retreat. And I'm not wanting to repeat much from last year so that it's truly a new experience. And in that process of what are we going to discuss, and I don't want to repeat, it is just striking me anew how deep and rich and varied this craft that we all practice together is at its heart, because there are these performance elements and there are deep, fundamental human storytelling elements. And I feel like we talked about some of that today. And then there are also business elements that maybe don't seem on the surface like they influence the craft, but when you really approach them from a craft perspective, they actually do have an influence on how we do the art that we create. And then there's the tech elements, which again might not seem on the surface to be craft-based conversations, but then kind of actually are. And it just all fits together into such a complex interplay, making up the craft of audiobooks and this, rich storytelling medium that we love. And so, yeah, I guess what's exciting me is just that there's still so much to learn about this work, and that there are insights and breakthroughs and ideas that are just not going to stop coming, no matter where you are in your career. And that's a really beautiful thing. And I'm very excited about that today. So yeah, that's my answer.
That is exciting.
It is.
And I also, in hearing your answer, am excited about the people in our industry, you being one of them, Jennifer, who are pushing the envelope with the offerings to the industry. Like, you didn't have to, you ran a very successful conference last year. You could just run the same conference, and you chose, I don't want to repeat things. Let's dig deeper. Let's explore. And the teachers who are doing that in our industry right now are the teachers who are exciting me, because you are, you're reflecting the industry and growing, like expanding the industry at the same time.
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. And in some respects, it feels like it would be lazy to just do the same thing, because the industry isn't the same now that it was a year ago. I'm not sure that I would necessarily be able to completely articulate all of those changes, but any artistic industry, any creative industry is going to be constantly evolving as tastes change, as the market changes and influences the work that's being purchased and being highlighted and, the work that we're being asked to do. So if I were just offering the same thing as last year, it wouldn't be as fun for me, for one. I wouldn't get to have these kinds of conversations. And yeah, it's my joy to reflect the industry. So yeah.
I mean, what I hear in that is I'm like, hey, you're a creative leader, and you're like, this is just how I breathe, though. That's what I heard in what you said.
Yeah, maybe.
I'm snapping for that. I don't know if you can hear it.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Well, Sarah, do you want to share what is exciting you about the craft right now today?
Sure. And I feel like this one goes well with our theme of really deepening our relationship with our bodies when it's counterculture, because I think that a part of our culture is perfectionism versus deep self-acceptance. I am always examining my relationship to imposter syndrome and how I can really embrace myself as an artist and know that what I'm bringing is worthy because it's true. And recently, the metaphor of kintsugi came to mind. So kintsugi is a Japanese, my understanding of it, I'm not an expert or anything, but it's this Japanese art of mending broken pottery with gold. So you end up with this beautiful piece that was fragments and is now a whole, but connected with these gold threads. And I was thinking of it as a metaphor of like, okay, what if our craft strengths, like the things we're really good at in our craft, are like our base, like the pieces of pottery, and our vulnerabilities are our gold. And specifically, I was about to do a book that had all these accents, and I was feeling like not enough. And I had put in all this work and time and effort into growing my accent skills, but they didn't feel like enough. And I suddenly was like, okay, but like, obviously, I will always want to, like, it matters to improve, to continually improve and refine my craft and my ability to do these accents. But like, I've got the basic pieces in place. I've got consistency. I've got enough clarity and skill on the accent that you can tell what accent it's supposed to be. And then I was like, so what if it's idiosyncratic and it's not quite right? That's the gold thread. That's the vulnerability. And maybe that makes it more beautiful. And it made me think of, I once listened to a title with a British narrator who had a bunch of American characters, and her American accent was weird. Like, it wasn't an American accent, but it was consistent and you could tell what it was supposed to be. And after about 2 minutes of being like, that's not American accent, I settled in and I bought into the world, and I bought in, and it ended up being like its own special idiosyncratic, like, her voice bringing forth this story mattered so much more than whether the American accent was precise. So I said, I wrote down in my notes here, don't forget the beauty in how the cracks help stitch together the whole.
Oh, I love that so much. The concept of kintsugi is something that I find very powerful and soul healing on a really deep level. Mm-hmm. And I love the thought that in our narration work, that's our vulnerabilities, the gold. That's really powerful.
Emily,
oh gosh,
what's exciting you today?
I have so many thoughts swirling in my head right now, and I know that they all like come back and relate to one cohesive point, but I don't know if I'll get there.
That's okay.
That's fine. Let's enjoy the journey.
Yeah, let me try. Well, oh my God, and that's exactly it. Okay, so I think that's actually probably the overarching point. So I've been thinking a lot lately. I had a conversation with Chris, and for those who are listening, Chris is my husband. I had a conversation with Chris about 2 or 3 days ago where I had this realization that like, I personally have just been having a lot of anxiety for the last couple months. I think we all know why. Yeah, a lot happening in the world. But it's really been affecting me. And like my sleep is off. I wake up with dread. My body is really unsettled. And I've been, kind of trying to figure out how to take care of that and how to be gentle with myself and all of that. And just having a lot of self-awareness over the last couple months and really paying attention to sort of signals that I'm getting about things. And the thing that happens when you do that is you don't just learn about what's going on with you right now. You start to notice other things that are patterns that help you with what you were confused about 5 years ago. So, you kind of learn a bunch of different stuff. And so one of the things that I kind of realized that I was talking with Chris about, I was like, sweetheart, what's really interesting that I've noticed that I think is a pattern over the last, pretty much like my adult life is when I've really strongly identified myself with something, it's ended up being kind of taken away from me. Like, no, not that. No, not that. And when I have held on to something much more loosely, it has lasted. I've never this is going to sound crazy on an audiobook podcast. I have never particularly identified myself personally as being someone who makes audiobooks. It's always been a thing that I do, a community that I'm part of, something I enjoy. But like when I would describe myself when I was younger, I'm an actor, I'm a singer, I was a bar owner. That was like a 2-year stint. I've done all of these other things. And when I've had those things that would kind of, instead of being, what do you do? What are you? When they've made that leap to what are you, they've gotten taken away from me somehow, whether that be because of debilitating stage fright that I couldn't perform live anymore. And so I moved away from that. When COVID hit and we had to close the bar, there are just these different things that, I was very strongly identified with my family. And then we had, a period of things that happened where I kind of redefined my relationship with them in some ways. And those things felt very painful at the time. All of them, when that thing that you're so strongly connected to feels like it's being pulled away or it's gone. And then you're left with this sense of like, well, then what am I? Or who am I? Or, where do I stand? But then I look at audiobooks, which I think most people from the outside would be like, that is who you are. That's what you've done your whole life. And for me, it's just like this joyful side quest that I've always had a foot in that door. Like I've always been somehow involved with this industry because I love the people so much, because I love telling stories. I love making audio products. I think that they're awesome, that we have this technology. There's so many things about it that I love. And yet, blessedly, I have never strongly identified myself as being, and so that's why it's lasted. And so when I think about where we are in the industry right now, and I think about all of the changes that we're facing, and there are so many ways to get anxious and upset about these things because they're different than they've always been. And it's making things harder in a lot of ways for a lot of people. And, I don't diminish any of that. I understand that there are people who've been doing this for their whole career, and now they're facing some real struggles of whether they're going to be able to continue in the way that they want to. And all of that is very real. But we also always have the choice of how we are going to look at something. And that affects the way that we feel about it. So even when problems are very real and we look at them a slightly different way, it can make us feel better about things. And then we can have a better experience of it, even when it's hard. So the way that I am looking at the industry lately, because I have been a little disheartened by how many new people are flooding into it that don't seem to have the same sense of things that we have before. This beautiful camaraderie, this a rising tide lifts all boats. You get a lot more competition, and that's a harder attitude to maintain. And I feel sad about that sometimes. I look at the way that different relationships are happening with different producers that, someone might retire and that's your person that was hiring you for everything. And now that connection is gone, and that's sad. That's a loss to grieve, But also, when I allow myself to not closely identify with the way things have been, and I recognize that the only constant we are ever guaranteed in life is change, all of a sudden it just becomes so much easier to wake up every day. And um, we're like a 12-step household. My husband is he's an alcoholic. He's in recovery. He's been sober for years. And I am a proud member of the other organization that is related to the one that you find at the front of the phone book, um, because it's for family members of those that have alcohol issues. And both of them are 12-step programs. I don't say it out loud because there's like reasons about not saying, I don't know, that you're not supposed to do things in media with the organizations. But we definitely approach things from that sort of viewpoint. And one of the things that he does every day that I've been doing lately is waking up every morning and just asking the concept of higher power, whatever that is for someone, what can I do today? What would you have me do today? And I don't need to worry about what you'd have me do tomorrow. I don't need to worry about what I did yesterday. What would you have me do today? And I think that, Jennifer, that really speaks to what you have said about your conference can't be the same this year because it's not the same industry this year.
Right.
And Sarah, like you've talked about how, there might be these broken pieces, but then you've got this gold that can put them together in a more beautiful way than they even were before. And I think that's the gift that we have every day when we wake up and we ask ourselves, what can I do just now, just today? Don't need to worry about anything else. I can put something together in a new way that I didn't know was possible. Some new opportunity that didn't even exist yesterday can come my way today. The job I have right now didn't exist the producer job that I have right now. I got asked to apply to be a producer at a big publisher. And when I talked with the person about what that would look like, it wasn't going to fit with what I needed to do for the Nomad narrator. But through that conversation, I made a list of the things that I would need if I was a producer, because it was the first time I'd ever thought about being a producer. And I was like, I might actually really like this, but this is what that job would have to look like. And it didn't exist in the industry. It wasn't there. And 6 months later, it did. And I saw the ad for it. Someone sent it to me and I was like, I've not heard of this publisher before, but this is exactly what I said I would need. I'm going to apply to this. And now I am doing kinds of work that I never even realized were possible. I'm creating audio originals with authors that are doing these teachings that I get to help them produce these things in front of a live audience. And then we record them and we put them together with music. And like, I didn't even know these things existed. But if we just show up every morning and ask, all right, what can I be available to just for today? I think that's what's most exciting to me right now about the audiobook industry is we really are in such a phase of change and growth and new audience reach. And I think it's exciting. I think it can be really exciting.
Oh, there is so much to dig into with what you just shared, Emily. Thank you. I think the one line that was sort of a gut punch for me in a very positive way is the statement that we don't have to identify with the way things are right now, and that we can allow the change to be exciting. When you reframe it, when we think about it in that slightly different way, the change that felt really scary and awful and hard before might still be hard, but it can be hard and exciting and challenging positively. And a lot of that comes from how we're thinking about it.
Yeah. Sarah, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm feeling moved and excited and reflecting, in hearing your response, reflecting on how, for me, a huge key in my life that I am still practicing and in process with is the more I can embrace the beauty of change, the less anxious I am. So I was reflecting on how, for me, what you just shared is not just the antidote to, any fear in the industry or about my career, but actually the antidote to fear in my life.
Yeah, I feel that. I've started to have this image of like, as the world gets scarier, we have to get more mischievous.
I
Mm.
love that.
And that, like, as these things are being tossed at us, we just kind of dance out of the way, smiling, like twirling past things. And, like, yeah, anything terrible could happen at any moment, but I'm going to dance my way through this change like a waltz. And I don't know, something about that image of, like, instead of when I think about danger or scary things, I think of like really tense, really like ducking, hiding, something, physically like, I don't know if any of this is making sense. I might
It's
have just
making
gone into
complete
a totally
sense.
different area. Okay.
Nope,
But
with you.
I'm thinking of like really, like jerky, sudden movements, and that doesn't feel good. And so, like, when I think about what would feel good to my body with all of this change happening, it's like a more fluid approach, a more joyful approach, a way to recognize that, like, yes, at any moment something terrible could happen, but it hasn't happened yet. Like, we deal with things when they happen. We prepare for what we need to, but like we don't anticipate, like we don't have to be in pain until there's pain.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if any of that makes sense. It's just kind of the way, like I said, I've been thinking about a lot of this stuff lately. And it's been kind of a journey of finding the things that work for me and for my body and my mind.
Yeah, it made me think of I might be mangling the quote, but it's something like he who worries suffers twice. Um,
Yes.
I've heard
but
that before.
I think there's nuance though, because right, like saying like dance away with mischievousness. He who worries suffers twice could be interpreted as, oh, just sweep it under the rug.
Yeah, that's a big no. It's not
Yeah,
that.
it's
It's
with
not that at all.
aliveness and presence and awareness. And I also got the
Yeah.
image with dancing of like, I don't know, I was like, oh, what dance connects and unites people? Like the hora, the Jewish, like, for people who don't know,
Yes.
that's the dance where like the kind of stereotypical dance you see on TV where like people are at like a bat mitzvah or a Jewish wedding, like holding hands and dancing in a circle. That like in this mischievous dance we can hold each other's hands and dance with each other and support each other
Yeah.
in community.
Yeah. It's much more about all of those things. It's not at all about ignoring the reality that we're facing.
Yeah.
That part doesn't work. It's and like I don't dance, so I don't even know why I came up with this. Like I'm a terrible dancer. But there's something about like moving fluidly in times of distress instead of giving into those like jerky sensations of fear and I don't know. It seems like not only does it feel better, it also feels like it has a chance of a better outcome. So
Absolutely. And I also object to the characterization that you are a terrible dancer because it makes me think of what we're saying about trusting our bodies. Like, who judges what good dancing is? It makes me
that's
think
so
of
true.
the scene in Wicked where Elphaba comes into the
I
middle of the
love
dance and
that
just does her
scene.
own damn
Yes.
dance.
Yes.
I love that scene. I love that so much. Yeah, and I think that might actually even be part of what fed into this idea for me is that because what are the words to that song, Dancing Through Life?
Mm-hmm.
Mm,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just kind of finding your own way to do it. I don't know. There's just something really powerful to me. And I certainly haven't mastered this by any stretch, but it's in my value system and it's what I want to do is when we are faced with really scary stuff to recognize that it's trying to take away our joy.
Mm-hmm.
The revolutionary thing is not to feed into that, but to remind ourselves that there's something bigger and to feed into that. And so I think sometimes it's like you said, people can think, oh, you're just being cavalier, but it's the absolute opposite. It's like you're going through the middle of all of that concern and deciding something else.
There's actually a book on this subject called Pleasure Activism that speaks to exactly what you just said, Emily.
Yeah. And she is brilliant, the author of that book. Is it Adrienne Marie Brown?
Adrienne Marie Brown.
Yeah, I've heard her on a lot of stuff, and I don't think I've read that book. I think I read another book by her, but she looks into that a lot. There's also this is a whole nother subject, but the Nap Bishop of the Nap Ministry,
I've heard of this, yes.
Trisha Hersey. She was, I think, getting her master's degree or a doctorate and was just completely exhausted and just could not push herself any further in all of the different. I think she was a mom and working and getting this degree. And she just, I think, like laid down one day in the middle of things and took a nap because she was like, I just can't do this anymore. And the more that she gave into her body's need for rest, it was kind of what we were talking about earlier. The more she recognized how the whole world is set up to keep us from ever feeling truly rested and connecting with ourselves because of all of the implications that that would cause in the way that different systems are set up. And, she comes at it from the perspective of a Black woman who saw a lot of very deep and lengthy back into the past ties to slavery and racism and all different kinds of things that right off the top of our heads we would not necessarily notice. But she makes some really amazing points about how the way that our entire country and economy and system are set up based on those things from hundreds of years ago, it's still very much affecting all of us. And this need that we have in capitalism to feel like we don't have something, that we need it, and that we're not enough, and that we have to keep pushing ourselves to get there, and that our bodies don't matter because they're really just a means for making money. And a lot that we can't get into here. But if anyone ever wants to look into that, I really highly recommend the Nat Bishop. She's kind of phenomenal.
I believe the book that she's written about that is called Rest is Revolution, which just the title really, strikes something in me. Rest is Revolution.
Rest is Revolution. And then she has another one that came out recently.
I didn't realize that. I'll have to check out that one too. I've read Rest is Revolution. So
yeah.
Emily, thank you so much for the depth of your insight into the craft of audiobooks and life, the craft of life.
Craft of life. I like that.
Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so great to talk to you all. I love this.
Thanks so much for listening to Crafting Audiobooks. We've been your hosts, Sarah Beth Goer
and Jennifer Jill Araya.
Wishing you happy audiobook listening and/or crafting.
Bye for now.